Okay. Now, like I said before, you'll notice that on our pages here, we have this little outline right there outside of our divs that kind of looks ugly. This is because we have what's known as margin and padding. Now, just to remind you what margin and padding are, I'm going to take a look at a high-level overview of the box model. This right here is a little CodePen page that illustrates what the box model is. The box model just describes how we lay things out on a web page. Whenever you create a div, every div has a couple things. It has a margin, which is the space outside of the border. It has padding, which is the space inside the border. And it has a border. Borders are pretty easy to explain. I can come to my style page and I can say I want all my divs to have a border. The property of border, I'm going to make them solid. I'm going to make them 1 pixel. And I'm going to make them black. And if I do this and I look at my page, now you can see that the border right here, there's a black border around each of these divs. Sometimes I use this to see where each of my elements are on their page. And I tell everything on the page to have a solid 1 pixel black border. To do that, I'm going to get rid of this on line 21. And I'm going to use what's known as the wildcard selector at the very top. To use the wildcard selector, and don't do this for anything in your actual styles, but when you hit the star selector, it selects every single thing on the page. And then we can make everything on the page have a solid 1 pixel black border. And then if I go back to my page here, you'll see literally everything on the page has a black border. You notice this? Yeah. It's just a good way to see what is what, where it is, what its borders are. Okay, I see everything on my page has a border. I see where it is, what it looks like, how much space each thing is taking up. It's a really good way to check that out. Now, the space inside the border we call padding. Anything in here inside this border, that's called padding. The space outside the border we call margin. And margins don't affect the actual size of the elements because they just push other things away from each other. But padding does. If you add more padding to an element, it pushes things, the content on the inside, away from the border. It makes things look a little nicer sometimes. If we look at this element right here, it has padding of 30 pixels on each side. It kind of looks like a picture frame a little bit. And that's kind of the comparison I use to describe how divs with padding look on a web page. Now this box below it has padding on the left and padding on the right. 30 pixels on the left, 30 pixels on the right. It makes it wider, but it doesn't change anything about the height or the size of the actual element itself on the top and bottom. However, it also has a 5 pixel border, which adds 5 pixels of space on any side. Now, both this box and this box have a space in between them here. They're pushed apart from each other. That is what we call margin. The margin is pushing this box away from that box. And to get margin, which doesn't affect the size of the page, we actually just give things a margin property. So I'm actually going to get rid of this wildcard selector right here. And everything returns to normal. But my body automatically comes with a little bit of margin and border. And padding, excuse me. So if I go into my body element and I say margin 0, you'll notice something just happened here. All of a sudden, all the elements on my page, right? We lost that little weird space at the top. So if I look right here, now all of my elements are perfectly aligned with the outside of the page. That's because when you get rid of the margin on your page, everything now isn't automatically pushing itself away from other things. I'm also just going to say for good measure that the body should have a padding of 0 also. Cool. Now this is starting to look like an actual header. It goes all the way across the page and it extends all the way to the top of the page. This looks much nicer. By specifying that our body should have a margin of 0 and a padding of 0. Everything that's a child of the body tag, which is everything on our page, starts off with those styles that we've applied right here. So this is really useful. But then if we want to change that, say inside my header div, I want to have my header have a padding of 2 pixels. If I do that, now you'll see that it's pushed up from the top 2 pixels and from the left 2 pixels. Everything now has a little bit of padding on the left and right and the top and bottom. That can be very nice. But just to show you what it is, I'm actually going to get rid of that because it makes it look a little uglier. Beautiful. I've also been using these pretty frequently, and I haven't talked about them at all. If you want to create comments in CSS, you start with a slash and then the star, and then anything that comes after that is a comment, and you can end it with a star and a slash. Now, comments do not get interpreted as code. They're only for humans to read, to leave notes for ourselves or any other developer who might be looking at our page later on. So I'm going to save this right now since I actually have a header, and I'm going to go in and make a few adjustments. I'm going to give this header element right here, I'm going to give it a border on the very bottom. Border dash bottom, and I'm going to give it solid 3 pixels red. And now if I save this and I go back to my big page, I see that my entire header div has a border on the bottom that's solid and red. This is kind of nice. It looks a little bit better. So what I've done here is I've used the border elements. I've used the border property, but I've selected only the border bottom to have a solid border that's going to be 3 pixels big, and the color is going to be red. Now, with borders, margin, and padding, we can actually give them values that go clockwise. They go top, right, bottom, left. So if I want to give something margin, border, or padding, I can say something like the top would have 5 pixels, the right would have 10 pixels, the bottom would have 20 pixels, and the left would have 100 pixels. So you can see I can use clockwise specifications, use 4 different values for the top, the right, the bottom, and the left. Now obviously I'm not going to do this because it doesn't look very nice, but I just want to show you how we can apply top, right, bottom, left, margin, padding, and border to any element. So for the time being, I'm actually just going to get rid of this. And if you only want to select one of them, you can do what I did right here. You could say border dash bottom, or you could say something like padding dash top 5 pixels. Exactly, and it would be just padding on the top. Things like this, so you can space things out from each other exactly the way you want to. So this is a high-level overview of the box model, and this is actually how we're going to create layouts for all of our page. So in the next video, we'll talk about how to make this look a little nicer, and we'll actually start applying some professional styles to our page. But for the time being, I'm going to get rid of this padding top, and I'm going to end this video right here.